Hi everybody, welcome to the February Art Collaborative Video Challenge. Our challenge this month is to use all the colors of the rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, and stencils. Make sure to check the links below to see what the other artists are doing. I'm using my large mixed media journal and it's brand new, and I didn't want to get all the other pages dirty, so as you can see I completely taped it around with blue tape. I taped it to a board because today I'm going to be using a lot of acrylic ink. You'll see there is my sample trial and my stencils that I hand cut out of some very inexpensive dollar store file dividers. I used my old scrapbooking tools and made circles and strips and one that looks sort of like a ladder. And for my sample, I had put it on dry paper, put the stencils on, and then wet it, but I didn't like the white space left. So for today's work, I decided to wet the paper down thoroughly first, and then lay my stencils, truly they're masks when used this way, put my stencils down, make sure it's nice and wet under and around the stencils, and then I'm using Daler-Rowney acrylic inks. The colors are flame red and lemon yellow. I had to mix my own orange. I don't have an orange. I'm just putting them on liberally, moving them around with lots of water, making them blend. Next is light green, which is a nice lime green, and processed cyan, which is a kind of opaque white blue. I used Prussian blue, which turned out very dark. You'll see me blot a lot of that off because it was actually too dark. And Purple Lake as my violet. So here I'm just making them move around, adding water, being careful I don't blend any colors that'll make too much mud. And then you'll see I'm dabbing off some of that Prussian blue. It just was so dark it was looking almost black. So after it dried, it took only about an hour or two, and it was completely dry. I pulled off my stencils to see what I had underneath. There were some gaps I was showing you there where the paper buckled and left where the stencils didn't touch, but that gives nice variations. Here I'm pulling off my tape very carefully so as to not rip the paper, and my whole journal stayed clean. Oh, look at all those white pages, the white cover stayed beautifully clean. Off camera, I sketched in a quick face. I used that big circle on the right and centered her eyes and nose in there. I like drawing a face inside of a circle. I just used a graph gear and a stump to blend it out. And now I'm taking a size 8 round watercolor brush and using my liquid acrylic inks like watercolors. I did not know that was possible until a lesson from Christy Sobolewski that showed it works just like watercolor, except it's permanent. So I can really work it and put layers without pulling up the layers underneath. It's something I find I really enjoy. I started out with the flame red, doing all the darks in the face in one color. And I find it takes layers and layers. I start light, I add. It's a constant process of adding, smoothing it out, lightening the edges. As it dries, adding another layer, going back in, finding the darkest places, and just keep darkening it up. Starting with this one color, kind of monochromatic for the whole face, but I'll go back in with 2 more colors. Right now it looks like a lot of red and orange in this part of the picture, but there will be other colors going over top. So here I'm just darkening the darkest places. Checking if it's dry. See, I keep touching it with my hand. Moving on to the next color, some Purple Lake. I stopped to dry it. I felt like I was just taking a risk changing colors and not having it completely dry. So you can see where now adding the Purple Lake really starts making it pop, giving some drama to her eyes. I also found in the entire picture there was not much purple lake. It was only up in that top left corner and a little bit at the bottom. So I plan on introducing a whole lot more purple lake as this work goes on. It's a nice contrast against all that yellow and orange on the right-hand side. So here I'm using thin layers again over the darker areas. Wetting my brush, blending it in. I'm showing how I really am enjoying this journal. It's the first time I've used a Jane Davenport mixed media journal. The paper feels really nice. I flipped the pages to show you nothing is bleeding through. The paper has a nice soft feel. I have had seen some reports online where people's journals, though, the binding gave out and the binding broke halfway through. I'm going to be really sad if that happens, but we'll see. Okay, I finished with the purple lake, and now I'm getting out some of that Prussian blue for the darkest, her pupils. Give some depth in the eyes, a little bit of darkness to the eyebrows, nostrils. Under her chin, I'm making it really dark, which right now almost doesn't make sense, but it will make sense later when we put in the hair. There are little blue highlights to the eyes. I got out my dip pen with the purple lake ink to start making some lines for her hair. The dip pen was a little frustrating. I didn't have a deep puddle in my well. I only had a shallow puddle. And I found I had to re-dip and re-dip and re-dip. So I switched over to a fine brush for the big areas. That's a tiny liner brush. And I'm just intuitively making some lines without any plans, just seeing where they fall. Deciding where I want those shapes to stay forward and where I want those shapes to get pushed back. I'm intending a sort of abstract look with these shapes that are in the background. So some are half submerged, half show, if that makes any sense. You can see here I got frustrated with the dip pen, so I got out my Lamy, L-A-M-Y, fountain pen, which is a really nice fountain pen. And it happens to have a purple ink cartridge in it right now. So you can see I made a lot more efficient use of the lines without having to re-dip. The problem with that Lamy pen, though, it is the only ink I've used in this piece that's not permanent. So when I go back with the other ink, I have to be careful. It will re-wet and move. I decided I didn't like all that white space in that one circle. It was just too white. So I went back in with some light inks, quick dried it off. It was just popping out a little too much. So now I'm just continuing to darken sections of her hair, the dark part of her hair behind her neck, and now see the shadows in her neck make a lot more sense. Gives it a lot more depth. Here I'm just continuing to make the lines of her hair, some behind her shoulders, some in front, some behind the shapes, the circle shapes and ovals. And then on that left side of her face, well, I just turned the book around there, the left side, I want her hair to kind of meld out and blend in with those shapes. To me, it almost looks like a mini universe out there. And I want her to be intertwined with it and her hair part of it. There, I had to take a break, go away. Actually, it was a week before I came back on the next weekend to add more to her hair, thicken some lines, fill in some lines. There's really not a whole lot to explain here. It's just intuitive, where I think it needs some dark. I moved back to the bigger number 8 round brush at this point. And this was an impulse here to add some shading behind the right hand side of her head. And I'm really glad I did. It gave it some depth on that right side. It almost looks like clouds in the back. But now she really pops out against that empty background over there. Few more lines on the right hand side. To tie it all in. You could keep going with this. You could use paints, block out areas. I kind of like that stencil work just as it was though. So I thought a few lines of her hair to tie it in would be enough. Signing it, dating it, and here is the finished piece. I'm really pleased with it. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for the challenge. Going to give you some close-ups here. I'm holding the camera, so it's a little shaky. Here we go. Some close-ups. There's her eyes and her face. You can see the texture in the paper is really nice. Some of the close-up on the stencil work. That came out so pretty, it really didn't need a whole lot else. Okay, once again, this is a collaborative video. Please check out the other artists. And if you like my video, give me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.